Hey guys, welcome back to Stripped Astrology with Sarah. So today we are going to be diving deep into the Aries Man, and it's been a while since I've covered the full sign in one episode. So I'm so ready to talk about Aries Men because Aries season is creeping up as well. March 21st. And out of all the signs I've covered, this one just hits differently. Maybe it's because I've had like my fair share of Aries men in my life, or maybe because I'm just really excited to be back on this podcast with you guys after what feels like forever. But before you get too excited, let me be clear that I'm not officially back. I know, tragic, but you'll see me pop up, now and then when I get bored with, my actual life, which right now is mostly drowning in legal work, too much legal work. But, that's what happens when you start a legal business. Speaking of which, since we're already here, I did start a new business. It's called Direwolves Legal Group. We help pro se litigants and attorneys who need virtual assistants and pro se litigants who just can't afford the price that it costs for solid legal support to get an attorney. So we help with non-attorney document prep, with uncontested and contested divorces, civil cases, letters, you name it. And we also help hook you up with a trusted attorney, given that the marketplace for attorneys these days is just so hard, given that everything's virtual. So we connect you with a trusted one. So basically, we just make the legal world a little less painful. I don't run ads on this show, but let's be real. Nobody wants to sit through ads. But if I'm going to make an exception, I think it's going to be for my own goddamn business. So yeah, call us, hire us, let us help you. www.direwolveslegal.com for more info, or email sarah@direwolveslegal.com. Or feel free to email me on my Astro stuff if you have that contact. Anyways, enough about that. Let's get into the juicy stuff. So Aries Man. I love Aries as a sign. I really do. And especially Aries men, like you're just trying to get like a visual of what it may look like. Like I swear you just see a picture of the prototype of just a normal looking dude standing there looking like he owns the place. Because honestly, he does. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and this man is the blueprint of masculinity. He is the prototype, the model A, zodiac's firstborn son. And let's be real, this is why Aries women sometimes feel a little out of place in this sign, but we will get to that more in detail later, since right now we're talking about the guys, the absolute men of the zodiac. And if there were ever an astrological poster child for like raw, unapologetic masculinity, it would be Aries. He is masculinity in its purest form, physically, emotionally, psychologically. This man was born comfortable in his own skin, fearless, driven, living like he is the main character in his own action movie. So he's not a complex character. The opposite, I would say he's actually very straightforward. Aries men live as if the world exists solely for them to explore, conquer, and take what they want. They don't tend to ask for things. They assume ownership. They bulldoze, through life. Sorry, just something popped in my head real quick when I was just like, they assume ownership. Like that Blake Lively just popped in my head, but she's not an Aries, but they got that Blake Lively thing going on, how they just have to have ownership, or as she says, authorship of everything. Everybody's got Blake Lively fatigue these days. It's just like the girl just fucking plops up anywhere. Anyways, getting back to that. So they bulldoze, like I said, through life. They're oblivious to any obstacles, warnings, or the opinions of others. And they've never heard of subtlety. I mean, this man is forthright to a fault. He will say what he wants. He will do what he wants. And if you don't like it, then that sounds like your fucking problem. And the heat, oh my God, the heat. I don't know how to describe it, you guys, but Aries men radiate something primal, raw, some kind of intoxicating energy. And if you've ever been around an Aries man or dated one or even have one in your family, I think you know what I mean. There's just this aura, this warmth they give off. My longest relationship was with an Aries man. And let me tell you, as a Libra, also known as a human ice cube, I was, instantly attracted to the fact that his body temperature felt like a walking furnace. So it's like dating a living, breathing space heater. So all fire signs have that natural warmth, but Aries is just on another level. They radiate heat in a way that makes you question whether they have some sort of like internal solar core. It's magnetic, it's overwhelming. And if you're someone who naturally runs cold like me, it's borderline addictive. So now let's talk about how Aries men tend to look, because every sign of the zodiac there's 12 signs and there's like billions of people all over the earth. So obviously we're not all going to fit into a certain prototype of like what they're supposed to look like. But there are some qualities that are significant that appear in almost every Aries man. It's just shown in a different way depending on who you're talking about. But they, on the surface, usually have this clean cut, well groomed, all American type, I woke up like this type of appearance. But don't let that fool you, because underneath that polished, put together look is absolute hormonal chaos. There is a raging animal just waiting for an opportunity to take the lead in every sense of the word. So the thing about Aries men is that they know that they have this beast inside them, and they spend a good chunk of their lives trying to tame it, honestly. And they want to be the perfect gentleman. You know, they want to be the knight in shining armor, the storybook hero, you know, who rescues the damsel in distress. They love the idea of being the guy who opens doors, you know, pulls out chairs, sweeps a woman off her feet. But at the same time, they also kind of want to throw you over their shoulder and carry you off into the sunset like a caveman. So Aries men struggle with this internal conflict, that part of them that craves romance and then the part of them that is just like a walking testosterone factory. And what they eventually hopefully realize is that these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can be both the chivalrous prince and the passionate take charge lover, but it takes them a minute to kind of figure that out. So Aries isn't just any man. He is the man, the OG, the firstborn son of the zodiac, the original prototype for masculinity. He is astrology's primordial male. Yeah, I had to slow down when I said that word too. I know, primordial. So Aries is Adam, first man, the one who existed before Eve came along and made things interesting. And much like Adam, Aries, you know, exists in a very straightforward way. His life philosophy is simple: me want, me take. He doesn't overcomplicate things. He doesn't dwell on emotions. He doesn't get caught up in nuance. He just is. And this is exactly why he often gets labeled as insensitive, self-serving, or even brutish. But the thing is, he doesn't fucking care. And I mean, deep down, he is a very sensitive fellow, but he's never going to let that show out on the surface. He just doesn't give a fuck at all. He's fully aware of how he comes across, and he's not about to change it to make anyone else feel more comfortable. Aries men live by one rule: be first, be best, to dominate. They are wired to win, to take charge, to conquer. And this is why they thrive in competitive environments, both professionally and personally. And they have a lust for life that is directly linked to their need to be in control. And that's all thanks to their ruling planet, Mars. So now let's talk a little bit about Mars energy and how that overall affects Aries as a sign and as a man. So Mars is the planet of action, war, and aggression. It's literally named after the Roman god of war. So this is the planet of pure masculine energy, and Aries is its golden child. Mars gives Aries that outward, take no prisoners approach to life, the eagerness, the initiative, the rashness, the inability to see life from any perspective other than his own. Aries does not sit back and analyzes. He charges forward always. And in biblical terms, Aries is associated with creation itself, with the Big Bang, the first spark of life, the beginning of all things. And you can put that in a metaphor in so many different ways. And honestly, that checks out because Aries men are the walking embodiment of that raw, explosive energy. They don't hesitate. They don't second guess. They don't wait for permission. They exist in a perpetual state of action, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Now let's talk about what makes them so damn explosive, literally. They're the only cardinal fire sign in the zodiac, which means he isn't just fire. He is the first spark, the initial boom, the big bang in human form. Every day, every situation, every new encounter, it's a fresh start for him. He wakes up like it's game day, ready to win, ready to conquer, ready to set things on fire. Sometimes metaphorically, sometimes not. Aries is essentially the rising sun of the zodiac, and he's God's firstborn golden boy, the Adam before Eve showed up and complicated things. Aries exists in a world where he is the main event, to the sole focus. The concept of other people is frankly a little foreign to him. And this is where he differs from his opposite sign, Libra. Libra is all about we. Aries is about me. He doesn't just forget about others. He generally does not register their existence unless they are directly relevant to him. And listen, this self-focused nature bleeds into every part of his being, including his more primal urges, because let's be real, Aries men are the eternal walking hard-ons of the zodiac. If you look at their planetary glyph, yeah, we're going to get a little nerdy now, it literally resembles a male situation. And honestly, it tracks. Mars, Aries' ruling planet, governs the blood being pumped outward, which, yes, includes certain dangly areas. So the man is wired for action in every sense of the word. And in case you were wondering, he knows this about himself. You know, he's not exactly subtle. They are bold, brash, and about as self-aware as a golden retriever puppy who just discovered its own tail. You know, they charge straight ahead, full speed, no hesitation. There's no overthinking, no overanalyzing, no Virgo style self-doubt, just pure unfiltered go. And let's address the elephant in the room, or rather the booty in the room, because if there's one thing Aries men love, it's ass. They just love it. They are booty obsessed, boob obsessed. If you ask an Aries man what his preference is, he'll probably just say yes. Like, they are without fail highly visual creatures. If it looks good, they want it. It's primal, it's instinctual, it's Mars energy in its purest form, most thirsty form. But don't get it twisted. Aries may be driven by impulse, but he's not easy to impress. Not just anyone can capture this man's attention for long. His ruling planet makes him as spontaneous as he is resolute, meaning he's quick to pursue, but equally quick to lose interest if the chase isn't worth his time, which is very important. He has an intense libido, yes, but there's a very specific kind of person who can actually hold his attention. And trust me, we are going to get more into that. So let's get a little deep for a second. I'll bring us back, but I want to get into Mars, Aries' ruling planet, and the glyph, you know, that literally represents the emergence of matter, you know, the arrow shooting from the divine circle. Basically, it symbolizes birth, life, energy, you know, bursting forth from the great cosmic womb. And Aries, in a nutshell, you know, he is the beginning. He is the origin, the first spark of creation. And unlike some other signs who overthink every little thing, you know, Virgo, Pisces, you know, Aries doesn't deal in duality. He is just himself, fully one entity, no separation of body and soul, no existential crisis, just raw existence. Now, that being said, Aries does have a bit of an internal conflict because he feels every single thing in his body so intensely that sometimes he wonders if he's too physical, too animalistic. And while he'll never actually admit to doubting himself, because that would require self-awareness, of course, you know, deep down, he feels like his primal urges overpower him. And this is where the classic Aries push-pull happens. On one hand, he wants to be the fearless warrior, the man in control. And on the other hand, he's still kind of just a kid throwing a tantrum because someone took his toy. And this is what makes Aries men so fun and exhausting to be around, because they're simultaneously grown-ass warriors and chaotic toddlers at the same time. And because Aries rules the first house, the house of self, which corresponds to ages 0 to 7. So in a way, Aries men are stuck in that phase forever. And if you ever spent time around a little kid, you know exactly what I mean. They just say whatever comes to their mind. They act first, think later, have quick temper tantrums that will phase out in a few minutes. You'll think that they're the end of the world, but they're not. They're always running around, way too excited, way too loud, getting, you know, into things they shouldn't, with zero regard for consequences. And that's an Aries man. And yet, despite their attempts to downplay it, they have this unmistakable animalistic heat that they brim with. They radiate energy. Their ruling planet Mars literally rules blood, you know, the fiery force pumping through our veins, and the thing that keeps us alive. So Aries is that life force, and having an Aries in your life honestly feels like, you know, you need an Aries in your life, whether it's a woman or a man, to pump that life force and keep it going. They just like keep you excited. They bring you back down to earth, and they kind of just make you laugh at the little things. It just being around children. And every situation is approached with the intensity of a newborn screaming at the top of its lungs. And this is why Aries men don't just live life. They attack it. They charge into every experience like it was custom made for them. Like the universe is a video game that they were hand selected as the main character. And even everything they do feels like it was meant to happen. They don't believe in accidents. They do not believe in hesitation. They act on instinct because to them, that instinct is divine. And honestly, you can't tell them they're wrong. Now, are they a little full of themselves? Absolutely, yes, but they're fire signs, and all fire signs are. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius are legends in their own minds, but Aries, they take it a step further. because they, truly believe that whatever he does, whatever person he meets, whatever challenges is he faces is all part of some preordained destiny, because of course the universe wouldn't dare put him here without a grand purpose. So Aries men don't just believe in fate, they believe they are fate. If they're drawn to something or someone, it's destiny, plain and simple. Careers, relationships, life choices, all part of some grand cosmic plan where they are, of course, the main character. So he doesn't just fall for someone. He convinces himself that the universe designed this connection. Libra, his opposite sign, has a similar belief in meant to be relationships, but there's a key difference here. Libra believes that they are here to serve their partner, to create harmony, to add balance to their lives. Aries believes that their partner is here to complement them, to make them look taller, prouder, more powerful. They're not seeking balance. They're seeking someone who fits into their empire. And let's talk about that ego, because Aries is his ego, his sign's glyph, which, let's be real, looks suspiciously like a certain horned body part, symbolizes both his masculine energy and his unshakable confidence, like an actual ram. His horns, both literal and metaphorical, are his pride. They are his dominance, his power. And yes, his horniness is directly linked to this. The bigger the ego, the bigger the, well, you get it. So Aries charges through life with all the self-awareness of a toddler wearing a superhero cape. He's blissfully oblivious to anything that doesn't revolve around him. And honestly, I respect it. I wish I could live with that level of blind confidence. But alas, I don't have any Aries placements in my chart. So here I am analyzing them instead of embodying them. So let's talk now about Aries men and their favorite subject themselves. The ram with the biggest horns, yeah, let's call them horns, wins. And by wins, I mean get the first pick of the ladies. So whatever ram has the biggest horns is going to establish dominance over his male competition and basically walk around like the universe personally appointed him king of the jungle. Aries men embody this masculine supremacy, not just physically, but energetically. Aries is literally linked to Mars, Zeus, Jupiter, all the heavy-hitting warrior gods. He's the rival son, the one who challenges authority, disrupts the status quo, and takes what he wants. And yet, if you dig into the myths, you'll notice something hilarious. Ares, the god, was kind of a whiny little bitch. And unlike Zeus, who was out here overthrowing titans, Ares spent most of his time getting bodied on the battlefield and running back to his mother, Hera, for comfort. Sound familiar? If you dated an Aries man, you know. They will fight everything except their own emotions. They will run to their mommy if they're young. They'll run to their girlfriend or their wives, to like kind of have that little boy tantrum, but then they'll get over it. They'll wipe their tears if they have any tears and move on. But that's the duality of the Aries man, conquering warrior or dramatic crybaby. They'll charge headfirst into a battle, but the second they get a paper cut, they're going to be crying to fucking go to the hospital. Like they're looking for someone to baby them back to life. They grow out of it a little with age, but not completely. So expect to be both their biggest cheerleader and their emergency emotional support hotline. And yet, despite all of this, Aries men are irresistible. That raw, untamed masculinity, that sense of adventure, that childlike energy, that ability to be in the moment, it's intoxicating to be around. And women will say they want emotional depth, but honestly, Aries comes strutting in like Lancelot, oozing confidence and primal energy, and suddenly emotional sensitivity is overrated. It's the old age dynamic. Warrior meets goddess, chaos meets beauty. And Aries men, they know this and they love playing the hero. So if you want a sensitive man, listen, like go get yourself a Cancer. You want someone who during rom-coms and writes you poetry about their feelings, then definitely Cancer, Pisces is your guy. Aries is not here for that. His needs are simple, primal, and straight to the point. And honestly, as a Libra, I appreciate that. I do not need to do mental gymnastics every day just to figure out what a guy wants. I dated a Cancer guy. That's how it felt. It was like every day was a mental gymnastics, like a hellhole, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So with an Aries, if he's mad at you, he will fucking tell you. If he loves you, he will tell you. You will always know what's going on. He wants what he wants, and he'll make it very clear. Now, when it comes to the type of woman he's drawn to, Aries needs peak femininity. Okay, that is very important. You need to ooze in feminine nature. He is not interested in equal. He wants a muse an Aphrodite type, someone who radiates the Venus energy. That's why you'll often see Aries men gravitate toward Taurus and Libra women, because both are ruled by Venus and exude that goddess-like presence. And here's, the kicker. Aries actually prefers women with masculine energy and how they carry themselves. He doesn't want someone overly sensitive or emotionally needy. He's looking for someone strong, confident, but still soft. Just for him, though. It's a weird paradox, I know, but it tracks. So don't worry, we'll dive deeper into Aries and his love matches later. If you're new here, I always do a full breakdown of the stripping the man first, and then we go sign by sign and analyze how he vibes with each zodiac woman. So those episodes are usually 10 to 15 minutes each, and we get into all the juicy details of Aries and love, sex, relationships, and with each sign and how that all works. But first, we'll just finish dissecting the Aries men, and then we'll keep going. So if you want to keep an Aries man interested, here's the deal. You will need to be receptive, not just in a listen to him rant about his latest brilliant idea way, but in an I acknowledge that you are the alpha and I am here to admire you kind of way. He doesn't want competition. He's not trying to date his rival. He's looking for someone who makes him feel like the hero of his story. And now does that sound a little, I don't know, archaic maybe, but Aries men aren't about subtlety or modern gender role discussions. They want someone who embodies that old school soft feminine mystique, not someone trying to out macho them. And let's be real, Aries men have a severe allergy to loud, outspoken women who refuse to let them take charge. And the irony, the reason they're like this usually boils down to mommy issues. So Aries boys, they often have very strong-willed mothers, women who either coddled them like little princes or ruled the household with an iron fist, sometimes both. Meanwhile, their dad is usually either absent, passive, or just not kind of measuring up in the mother's eyes. So Aries grows up seeing his mother as the dominant force, but instead of seeking out another powerhouse woman, he subconsciously rebels against that energy in his love life. He doesn't want to be controlled or critiqued or, heaven forbid, reminded of his shortcomings. So what does he do? He gravitates toward women who won't challenge his supremacy, but will instead let him feel like he is the king he knows he is. And the funny thing, this mom versus dad dynamic often leaves Aries a little disconnected from himself, as he idolizes strength, yet he fears being overpowered. He wants to be the warrior, but he also craves constant validation. So basically, he's got a lot going on under the hood, even if he's never admitted it. But we'll unpack even more of these contradictions as we go. Aries may act like the king of the zodiac, but he's not sitting on some cushy throne like Zeus, not even close. Aries is the eternal warrior, always charging ahead, never stopping long enough to enjoy the spoils of victory. He's not built for comfort, he's built for conquest. And that, my friends, is his entire problem. Because of his upbringing, his overbearing mother, typically, not in all scenarios, of course, there are always exceptions, but usually, and emotionally distant father, Aries grows up with a weird relationship to feminine power, because on the one hand, he needs female validation. He thrives on it. He wants to be the gallant hero, the knight in shining armor, the Lancelot of the story. But on the other hand, he's low-key terrified of strong, independent women. They just frighten him, who don't let him control the narrative. He doesn't fully understand them. And let's be real, people tend to fear what they don't understand. So what happens? Well, young Aries usually hits a rebellious phase where he pushes back against his mother's influence and starts rejecting anything he sees as soft or too feminine. He works overtime to prove he's a man's man. Cue the Aries swagger, the puffed up chest, the rough and tumble attitude. He masters the art of appearing strong, self-assured, and borderline aggressively masculine. But let's be honest, a lot of this is overcompensation, because deep down, he's still that little kid desperate for approval. And speaking of aggression, let's not forget that Aries lives for conflict. Mars rules the adrenal system, aka the fight or flight response. And Aries doesn't do flight. He's always been the kid on the playground, picking fights, throwing punches, and charging headfirst into trouble. He was always that kid who was just the bully kid growing up, which he tends to regret later on. But he sees every other guy as either competition or as a threat. Same thing, really. But over time, most Aries men figure out how to somewhat relax their combative stance. Because at the end of the day, if he senses a challenge, whether from another dude or from a woman who won't back down, he will gear up for battle. And that's just who he is. So Aries operates under the assumption that all men see the world the same way he does. And that's his biggest flaw. He thinks all men will look through life in like the lens of pure, objective, masculine logic. And to him, male bonding isn't always a necessity. It's barely even a concept. He has a lot of male friends, don't get me wrong. He coexists with other men rather than truly connecting with them. He doesn't invest a lot into the emotional energy into his male friendships. In the Aries' guy's mind, guys are guys. They're interchangeable, they're predictable, and they're ultimately unremarkable. So whether it's his closest friend or a total stranger, he approaches every dude with the same casual attitude. And you will never catch an Aries man fanboying over like some celebrity, no matter how famous or accomplished they are. Sometimes he will, instead of admitting that he's intimidated by, a alpha male celebrity, he will be like, oh yeah, that guy, he's totally hot. He's totally cool. He kind of, reminds me a little bit of myself. So they'll compare him a little bit to themselves to kind of not like look like they're fanboying over them, but he's right at home in hyper masculine spaces like locker rooms, sports bars, blending in, with the effortless confidence that makes it seem like he owns the place. But at the end of the day, he's not a team player. He plays for himself. So let's make that very clear. And that's, one of the most fascinating things about Aries is his unapologetic me first attitude. He's the walking embodiment of survival of the fittest, a true product of the first house of self. He does not waste time overthinking relationships or worrying about other people's feelings or catering to anyone's emotional needs. His energy is spent attacking life, chasing what he wants and taking it without hesitation. And yeah, this often translates into a massive sense of entitlement and a healthy dose of arrogance, but let's be real. That's also the part of what makes him so irresistible. Obviously, everybody's going to have a different chart, though. So I want to get into that briefly. So if we have somebody who's an Aries sun and he has other heavy Aries placements, say his rising sign's Aries, his Mars is Aries, his Mercury's Aries, things like that, he will be way more fitting this description than other people. If you have an Aries man, for instance, who maybe has a Cancer moon or a more like feminine side moon sign, or even a Venus sign, a more feminine side Venus sign, then you'll find a bit of a more sensitive side to them. But one of the worst placements, honestly, for Venus to be in is Aries, because Venus is all about love and Aries only loves himself. So Venus Aries people, they embody this also the more, they're just all about themselves. It's all about me, and whatever partner I have is going to bring something to the picture that has to do with me. But you'll find that Aries men who have charts that, have other maybe more feminine signs or earth signs or things like that will kind of calm down their nature a bit. So Aries is the only cardinal fire sign in the zodiac, which means he is pure, he is raw, he's the embodiment of an untamed spark. He is that fireball that is constantly hurling himself into new experiences and launching himself at anything or anyone he desires. There's no subtlety in an Aries man. His anger, his lust, his ambition, it's all right there, burning bright and impossible to ignore. And unlike Aries women, who tend to be a bit more detached and self-contained, Aries men are metaphorically and literally toward whatever ignites his temper or passion, making him one of the most explosive personalities in the zodiac. And historically, the two greatest weapons of war were the spear, used to kill rival factions, and the penis, used to impregnate women and spread the conquering race. And Aries, ruled by the god of war, carries both of those energies within him. But here's where it gets interesting. His cardinal fire nature isn't just about physical conquest. There's another layer, something more metaphysical. Fire, after all, represents spirits, and for Aries, self-idolization is particularly a birthright. So while he seems driven by carnal desire, his constant quest for sexual gratification is also on some level a search for spiritual fulfillment. And in his mind, these two things are inseparable, which can be exhilarating, but also deeply frustrating for him and his partners. And he doesn't just want a lover, he wants a predestined, preordained princess bride, someone who fulfills both his primal and divine needs. And for whoever takes on that role, let's just say it's a lot. So now we get into the core of the Aries man's, psychosexual struggle, the internal battle that defines so much of who he is. On one side, there's his raw primal nature, his anger, his lust, his sheer physicality. And then on the other, there's his relentless need to be a virtue crusader, a righteous warrior, a man who masters his, more basic instincts in pursuit of something greater. And this internal conflict often creates a dangerous schism in his personality. He wants to be the noble knight, the hero, the self-disciplined force of nature who chooses virtue over vice. But his first house emphasis on physicality makes him feel like he's too grounded, he's too basic. And despite any delusions of being divinely guided, he secretly fears that he lacks true spirituality. And so he compensates. He adopts a soulful man persona, sometimes without even realizing it, as if performing depth will somehow make it real. But the truth is, Aries isn't lacking in spirituality. He just doesn't recognize it for what it is. Unlike figures like Christ who reached divinity through public self-sacrifices, Aries' spiritual path is more like that of Buddha, who, by the way, was an Aries. Buddha did not seek enlightenment by crusading or suffering for the world. He achieved it by turning inward, by embracing his inherent selfhood. And this is Aries' real path to transcendence, by not fighting against his nature, but actually understanding that his power, his drive, and his presence are his spirituality. So the lesson here is that Aries doesn't need to prove anything. He already is. And at its core, Aries really teaches us that spirituality isn't something we seek. It is something we already have within us. And there's so many Aries men who take them years and lifetimes to learn this. But while Buddha found enlightenment by sitting still and turning inward, that's hardly Aries' strong suit. Stillness, self-reflection. It's not exactly his thing. And yet this is both his greatest challenge and his biggest opportunity for growth. Now let's talk about the Aries man's mind and body, because trust me, his head, literally the part of the body ruled by Aries, is always racing. He is constantly thinking, constantly moving, constantly fixated on something. Put him in a social setting and you'll find him locked into an intense one-on-one conversation, passionately proving some elaborate theory, usually about himself and what makes him tick. He assumes everyone is dying to understand the inner workings of the most fascinating creature himself. And honestly, if you are zoning out, just keep nodding. It's easier that way. But the moment, someone else takes the floor, Aries is suddenly distracted. He will start fidgeting, making special requests from the waiter, checking his watch, glancing at emails, fixing his hair in the reflection of a nearby window, because the most interesting thing in any room will always be him, of course. And the Aries man, son of Mars, inherits both the war god's dashing looks and notorious ego. And he has to keep himself occupied somehow while pretending to listen to what you're saying. So there's an old rumor about Marlon Brando, a classic Aries, that perfectly sums this up. Apparently, when acting in scenes, Marlon Brando, he'd mentally replace the dialogue with bullshit, 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 my line, bullshit, 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 my line. He said that in an interview, and I just found that really fascinating because honestly, that is peak Aries energy. Just take a look at some of the most iconic Aries men, people such as Hugh Hefner, Russell Crowe, Heath Ledger, Ewan McGregor, so many of them, Paul Rudd, yes, Ant-Man himself. These guys all have that same everyone else be damned perspective on life. It's both their greatest asset and their biggest flaw. And Aries isn't exactly known for being sensitive, especially when it comes to women. He has zero connection to what anyone would call a feminine side. And in terms of looks, they can come in two main types. They're usually either the eternally boyish ones, think like Ewan McGregor, Matthew Broderick, Robert Downey Jr., Jackie Chan, forever rocking those jeans, sneakers, t-shirt, baseball caps, or there's the super masculine ones like Gregory Peck, Christopher Walken, men who look like they were born with chest hair. So an Aries man will always look like he just got a fresh haircut. Seriously, it's a thing because they're ruled by their head. That's the body part that rules their sign. So they're hyper aware of their head and that it's his defining feature, keeping his hair meticulously trimmed, clipped, and squared off, often giving off that kind of Secret Service agent kind of vibe. Everything about his appearance follows that same squared off aesthetic. His shoulders are so straight, like you'd swear he left the hanger in his shirt. They're crisp, pressed, perfectly creased clothes. But despite all this outward polish, there is something undeniably animal about them. And that's what makes them so sexy, in my opinion, at least. It's like you got all that manliness and then you got that animalistic nature underneath. So it's like fully closed, he'll already give off, that raw, untamed energy, but stripped down, there's no mistaking it. Even if he's not hitting the gym daily, his physique is always lean towards tough and brimming with testosterone. He's got that classic Aries build, broad shoulders, long chest, solid neck. It's little wonder that he's just so raw, and that physicality isn't just for show. And he radiates kind of romantic heat that's just overwhelming. And he looks like a man who's single-minded in his desire to conquer whoever catches his eye. And often, as many times as possible, he's the type to both pleasure and exhaust his partner in the process. He's passionate, he's vigorous and relentless, and he brings that energy into every encounter. And Aries men have that kind of Popeye kind of physique, thick forearms, strong biceps, natural, like athlete kind of look. His body is always ready, like deep breaths, quick reflexes, built-in sense of urgency. His ass is alarmingly muscular and firm, even as he ages. His face is similarly well structured, tight, high cheekbones, sharp nose, eyes that are quick and always scanning. His hair, no matter the color, always has a dry, sandy quality to it. So he's all muscle, movement, and momentum. So everything about an Aries man physique feels like it was, designed for action, like he was built in a lab for peak performance. His body fits together in a perfectly streamlined unit with a posture that's always upright, arms hanging open at his sides, palms naturally facing forward. There's a stiffness to him, almost like a G.I. Joe figurine. His movements are precise, sometimes a little rigid. Mars, his ruling planet, isn't just a metaphorical influence, it's physical. Aries men are like living furnaces, like constantly generating energy. If he's sitting, he's shaking his leg. If he's leaning back, he's rocking his chair. He's hard pressed to stay still for long. But when it comes to his humor, that depends. Aries isn't always known for being like the funniest guy in the room, but when he is, his humor is straight to the point. He is not one for layered wit or elaborate sarcasm. He goes for the immediate hit. And while he might not always get certain jokes, but when he does find something funny, it's usually because it's bold, blunt, and probably a little inappropriate. And Aries men are often so caught up in their own thoughts, either planning what they'll say next or internally hyping themselves up, that they might manage a polite smile, but don't expect them to be like on the floor laughing. Even when sitting still, they tend to overheat. And with that, fire sign energy through them, strong body odor can obviously become an issue. And it's something they are actually painfully aware of, which is why many Aries men are obsessive about their hygiene and grooming. Thank God, or else they would literally be like animals. Their efforts almost feel like an attempt to tame the sheer and unchecked masculinity that lurks just beneath the surface, like kind of like Superman trying to keep his Clark Kent disguise intact. So he styles himself a straight shooting, clean cut look, often having that like classic type of aesthetic. This balance is really critical because it's how he attracts the kind of woman he wants, one who is just deeply as committed to her feminine nature as he is unapologetically devoted to his masculinity. And speaking of masculinity, Aries is fascinated by it. He's obsessed with what defines him as a man, borderline like obsessed about his own masculinity. But just as he's hyper aware of what makes him him, he's equally intrigued by the exact opposite. He is intrigued in that sharp contrast between himself and the feminine. So for Aries man, there are two forces that dominate their lives, woman and beast. And these two opposing energies shape their self-exploration and define the way that they experience the world. Because on one hand, they lack proverbial feminine sides that other male signs often tap into, yet they desperately seek connection with the opposite sex. On the other hand, they are acutely aware of the raw, animalistic nature that rages within them, the primal, aggressive, untamed force that drives their instincts. And this creates a lifelong internal struggle. Aries men are naturally drawn to women with their softness, their allure, their mystery, yet they are simultaneously at war with the beast inside themselves, and they sense its presence, constantly bucking and rutting beneath the surface. Many Aries men spend their entire lives trying to suppress it. From early adolescence, they become hyper aware of their own bullying tendencies or domineering impulses, and rather than embracing them, they begin to despise that part of themselves. And this launches them into a personal crusade for virtue, shaping their approach to life, and more specifically, their relationships. Now, Aries men have this deep internal battle between their raw primal instincts and their desire to be a noble, heroic figure. It's almost like a subconscious effort to tame themselves, to prove that they're more than just brute masculinity. And ironically, this effort often manifests in somewhat of a chauvinistic way, believing that women are delicate, fragile, and in need of saving. And this belief is ingrained from childhood, often by, like I said, a mother who held him to a kind of higher standard than the other boys, leading him to see himself as superior, like the ultimate male archetype. And the problem is his mother's dominance made him seek the complete opposite in a romantic partner. So women who seem helpless, soft, and in need of protection, the Aries man has a deep-seated attraction to the classical damsel in distress. And this honestly is probably their biggest falling point because they have so much to offer. But then when they go offer it to women, and usually women who will fake that damsel in distress because they know certain men like that, so they're just constantly dealing with like this woman who's supposedly in distress, but the distress is never going to stop. And then it will drive them crazy because at the end of the day, like we said, they don't like too much drama, but they do like feeling like they are the man in the relationship and like they have a purpose here and that their woman needs them. And while that's not, necessarily a bad thing, it just becomes a pattern. And it becomes one, like I said, that can really backfire in a big way because many women recognize this dynamic, like I said, and may lean into it, playing up their vulnerability to attract and keep them. But here's where it gets messy is when that woman evolves. If she grows into her own power, becomes independent, and starts supporting him, Aries can subconsciously feel thrown off. He may not even realize it, but suddenly he starts feeling restless. And before he knows it, he's seeking out another damsel, falling back into that cycle. So this is really their Achilles heel. He confuses his mother's overbearing nature with like true feminine strengths, not realizing that a woman can be both powerful without being emasculating. And if he doesn't confront this, he risks sabotaging the very thing he built, the relationship with a woman who once needed him but now stands as his equal. But if he does get that lesson, he will really embrace the balance. He will love having a strong woman who also needs him as well and caters to him as well. If you want to be a good girlfriend or wife to your Aries husband, just cater to him. It reminds me of like I'm a huge Candace Owens fan. Like Candace Owens, like read her book, Make Him a Sandwich. Make him a sandwich, do something that will make your man feel like he's needed, like he's wanted, like, and that he also values you being in his life as well. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily being like subservient. No, it means that you love your man just like he loves you and you want him to treat you with respect as well and cater to you. If you're not doing well or if you're being lazy one day, you'd want your man to make you a sandwich, right? Or like do something. So strength in a woman, doesn't mean she's a threat. It just means she's capable. And if he can learn to appreciate that rather than run from it, he might just find himself in a relationship that truly lasts. So Aries men, like I said, they tend to have moms who, I don't know how to put this like lightly, but they basically treat them like the second coming of Zeus. If their marriage was lacking in romance, which usually it is, all that unfulfilled affection gets dumped straight into her son. And this doesn't exactly set him up for, a balanced emotional life. But, don't worry, they find a way to compensate. Instead of dealing with his emotions like a normal person, he just goes all in on masculinity. He will every Aries man, has a path. Some of them take their hyper masculine obsessions and channel them into being like fitness freaks or adrenaline junkies. Others might use that deep dive into male identity as kind of a stepping stone for self-discovery. And if that's their thing, explore a different lane of attraction. But for the most part, I would say Aries is the classic Adam from the Adam and Eve storyline. He's traditional, he's primal, and completely oblivious to the fact that women are, in fact, actual human beings with their own complexities. But that doesn't mean that he can live without a woman. Like, he definitely needs a woman in his life. He's probably like the main, that's why I'm saying like they're least prone to homosexuality, because they are just so fascinated with women. And even if they do end up being homosexual, they probably tend to have a lot of women in lives like as friends and so on. Sorry, just letting me my sake. So now let's just put it out there. So Aries men are picky as hell. Like, if we're talking about who they are attracted to, like, they are fucking picky. Okay, as if they like have the right to be picky, but they are picky. So like, if they could custom order their ideal woman straight from the universe, they absolutely would. Trust me. And this is no casual like Tinder swipe situation. Aries take choosing a mate as seriously as a medieval knight proving his worth on the battlefield. His entire existence is basically a nonstop quest to win the most high value prize, aka the woman, who checks off every single unrealistic box in his self-created imagination. Because in his mind, he's Adam and he's just patiently waiting for his Eve to be delivered from the heavens, handpicked by fate, made by his rib, just like Adam, made by his body part, made by him, created by him, and conveniently designed to adore him like the gift to humanity that he believes he is. So she must be flawless. She must be thin, pretty, polished. He doesn't like too thin. He does like a little cushion in his woman. Like he likes a big ass, big tits. So he's open to, the fat, PHAT fat, not FAT fat. So he loves that little kind of trophy wife type woman, someone who's really ultra feminine, like I said. And of course, she should be more than happy to worship him in return because he's Aries, the original alpha. So empathy, emotional depth, actually seeing his partner as a separate person with her own complexities, that's something that Aries struggles with a bit. But like I said, it will have to do with the chart. So like say he has a Aries Venus, then he probably really does struggle with that. But if he's just an Aries sun and his Venus sign is something more earthy, like Taurus Venus, Virgo, maybe not Virgo Venus, I'd say Taurus Venus, Cancer Venus, Libra Venus, things like that, then he would be more empathetic and have more emotional depth. But if he has too much Aries placements, it's never good to have too much. Too much me is never good. In his head, his ideal woman is just an extension of himself, much like how Eve was created from Adam's rib. So he literally cannot compute relationships in any other way. His first house of physicality makes sure of that. Like if a woman's appearance is not going to meet his golden standards, then he's already going to be like mentally out of it before she even speaks. And that's exactly why Aries guys are the kings of love at first sight. He spent an entire life waiting for that moment, convinced that when the right one appears, it will just click, like the heavens parting and a divine bell ringing in his head. No deep introspection required, just instant confirmation that, yep, she's the one. And just like that, he's all in. And now let's talk about them treating themselves like as kids. Like for instance, they're the type of kids that you'll find running around convinced that they're the main character of some epic superhero saga, but don't expect them to be team players unless of course they get to be the star of the show. If they're not like the quarterback or the lead fighter or the chosen one in whatever scenario they've cooked up in their heads, then they're really not interested. And if there's a sport that lets them compete solo while proving they're the strongest, fastest, most dominant man alive, then they are all in. Martial arts, boxing, racing, they love those types of stuff. It's less about fitness and more about feeding, their inner warrior. But here's the kicker. It's like Aries guys low-key have a complex, about self-control. They're not big on solo sessions, if you know what I mean, partially because they have some weird subconscious fear of spiritual, depletion, as if they'll lose their life force like a video game character. So instead, they throw themselves into physical activities to burn off all that pent-up testosterone because nothing says self-restraint like getting into fights for fun. But when it comes to dating, they will start early. They usually hit puberty very early. So they tend to have their first girlfriend by like 7, 8 or something. And they'll usually find themselves drawn to those delicate, helpless, princess types, the ones who look like they just stepped out of a Disney movie, like the typical Hercules girl, damsel in distress, Meg, and, need a strong, man to save them. It makes him feel noble, like all his, he just loves that feeling. And it's because now he gets that ultimate reward. He gets that fragile feminine woman who needs his protection. But here's the plot twist. This is all for show. Deep down, Aries is also drawn to the wild, the uninhibited, and the overly sexy woman who would probably wreck his world, but he can't have that side of himself reflected back at him. So what does he do? He convinces himself that only the delicate princess is worthy of his greatness. And here is where it gets really messy. Some Aries men, not all, but definitely enough to call out, actually lose interest in a woman after they've slept with her. Yeah, that whole perfect goddess image, shatters the second she becomes real to him. And ironically, nothing makes him want a woman more than her not wanting him. So if you want to keep an Aries man hooked, play hard to get. Even if you're already dating him, even if you guys are already married, just act like a little distant and suddenly he's all over you, ready to win you back. And honestly, the best way to keep an Aries man interested is to let him chase you. He lives for the thrill. Whether it ends in victory or a restraining order is another story. So now let's talk about Aries and his infamous visual scanning, that look, the one where he sizes someone up like he's mentally evaluating, potentially breeding stock. Yeah, that's not just your imagination. You know, he has one of the most urgently high sex drives in the zodiac. He needs to let off more steam than any other sign. And with all that pent up Mars energy, when it reaches its breaking point, let's just say his gallant knight in shining armor act often takes a back seat to his more primal urges. If he can't fulfill his fantasy of meeting that eternal virgin who somehow also has Aphrodite's body, he's going to find some no strings attached situationship to get the job done. And let's be real, when Aries does separate sex from love, he's not out there, making sweet, poetic love to anyone. Okay, this man is called the Ram for a reason. If she's not his precious, untouchable, my precious pedestal princess, then she's a plaything, something that he just wants to conquer, ravage, and probably leave behind once the thrill wears off. But he will be honest about that, which I respect. Kudos to that. Unlike Scorpio, that will not be honest about that. So the rumors about Aries being rough in bed, yeah, those didn't start with his dainty long-term girlfriends or wives. They started with that poor girl who left his apartment just crying because she's like, okay, he's done with me now. So the thing with Aries is that he holds so much energy in his body, and the more Clark Kent he acts in public, the more he transforms into Superman in the sheets. So the more he holds back his animalistic nature in public, the more he's going to put that out in between the sheets in his sexual life. And while some women are very much here, for that healthy sexual aggression, the biting, the pitting down, the general take what's mine energy, others are kind of left in a state of shock. But hey, his partner enjoys little playful rough housing. Aries is all in. In fact, if she bites back, congratulations, he just imprinted on her like a werewolf in Twilight. Now, of course, after a wild night, Aries will be back to chasing his next delusional windmill by morning. But here's where things get interesting. When Aries actually falls in love, something shifts. That whole Madonna whore complex he's been running, suddenly it emerges. No matter her questionable past or questionable choices and exes, the second she becomes his, emphasis on his, she instantly transforms into his personal goddess. And once Aries puts someone on a pedestal like that, it's over in his eyes. She can do no wrong. Now let's talk about Hugh Hefner. He's our textbook Aries king. This man built an empire on Aries' signature dual obsession with woman, one part objectification and one part worship. And he did it so well that decades worth of Playboy subscribers actually convinced themselves that they're reading it for the articles. Yeah, sure. And listen, no man on this entire planet expects his woman to look as much as like an airbrush centerfold Playboy bunny as an Aries does. The literal audacity of this man's beauty standards, like if she's not Barbie smooth head to toe, he's a visibly uncomfortable body hair, like he'll throw up. A crime against humanity, against masculinity. Like, even though he has more body hair than anyone else on the zodiac, but God forbids that anyone mentions being on her period around him. Like, he'll act like you just cursed. Like, oh my God, do not even talk about your period, please. He's not the type of guy that would be into doing you while you're on your period. Trust me on that. Scorpio, maybe, other signs, maybe, but him, hell no. He cannot handle that messy nature. No, it just skews his whole image of his perfect Barbie princess. So now let's talk about his type. He's a sucker for soft-spoken, sweet little things. The more vulnerable she looks, the more his knight in shining Aries instincts kick in. And for the less evolved Aries man, he's actively seeking out a damsel in distress, emotional baggage, perfect, past trauma, even better. The more helpless she appears, the easier it is for him to feel like he is her one true savior, locking her into that submissive role forever. Now, let's be fair. The self-actualized Aries man, yes, they do exist, I swear. He will eventually grow out of this perpetual rescuer fantasy. And the more evolved Aries, yes, they actually want a partner who is just as strong and independent as they are, and they respect that. But for some of them, yeah, they'll spend their whole life chasing the distressed princesses like it's their soul life mission. And you usually find the ones that tend to do that will have heavier Aries placements in their chart. Usually will tend to have Venus Aries, especially. Now, if you're with an Aries man, just know you're going to have to check your authority at the bedroom door. He's the conquering hero, the savior in the sheets, and honey, he's got a job to do. I mean, when I think about cartoon characters that like resemble Aries, like Cartman from South Park is like the typical Aries, like how he deals with his girlfriend Heidi on South Park. When he like says, "Oh, I'm gonna kill myself," or like Heidi, like when he like whines like that, is typical Aries, acts like a child. But then when she confronts him when he's with his friends, he's all like, yeah, I'm just chilling with my friends, babe. Like, yeah, what do you want, babe? Like, can I not like just chill with my friends? Like, so like, those of you who are South Park fans will know what I'm talking about, but that's just like typical Aries relationship behavior for you. There's zero room for hesitation, no delicate, drawn out lovemaking. This man is here for fast and furious sex, and he does not tire easily. Unlike some guys who pace themselves like they're in some kind of marathon of sensuality, Scorpio, Aries is more like 100-meter sprint, followed by another 100-meter sprint, and then another 100-meter sprint. So it's fun. And listen, self-interest is built into his DNA. He is the first house energy personified, meaning that at the core of it all, he's in it for himself. But the wild thing is, because he's so instinct driven and raw, that actually works in your favor. Like, no weird overthought magazine approved techniques, no like, what's your deepest fantasy, babe, pillow talk type, weird shit. Nope, he just goes for it. And like an animal, it fucking works. And let's just address the elephant in the room. Like, does he sometimes finish a little too soon? Yes. Does he give a shit? Absolutely not, because he knows that he's got that Mars powered bounce back. And before you even have time to process disappointment, he's ready for round 2 or 3 or 4. Was it good for you? He probably won't ask, but he'll definitely be watching your reactions, because it's always about him. And an Aries man doesn't just love satisfying you. He loves that he was the one who did it. That's the real prize here. Forget foreplay. He doesn't see the need for it. Who has time for all that when the main event is already right there? He figures you'll get warmed up eventually, so why bother with all the extra steps? Missionary is probably his classic, doggy style sometimes, spooning, convenient. He doesn't need like a 50 Shades of Grey production. He doesn't need costumes or props or pre-planned role play. Like, he doesn't need effort. It's about that raw, animalistic, real in the moment passion. And when it comes to kissing, you don't expect him to be like a slow, lingering, romantic kisser. But like I said, if he has like more earthy placements as his Venus sign, then he may be. But if he's like an Aries Venus or a more fire sign Venus, then you won't really find that in his type of kissing techniques. He's more of a quick, passionate, let's get to the point kind of guy. But when you do find that in an Aries that has a nice earthy Venus with an Aries sun placement, then they'll definitely be the type that could, like a Taurus Venus, for instance, with an Aries sun, could just kiss you for days and not get bored. And it's the perfect mix of energy. So if you want to find a perfect Aries guy, I would definitely look for an Aries with a Taurus Venus. So yeah, and let's be real. This man lives for the validation. He doesn't just want to feel like he's rocking your world. He wants to see it. So keep those oohs and ahs he loves. Like, the more verbal you are, he will love that. Give him a wow, you're amazing, say his name. Ego will swell along with other things. And don't forget to just let him be the warrior he loves to be and worship him in real time. So he's definitely not above barking orders in bed. He lives for the power trip, enjoying when his partner follows along, like some very adult version of Simon Says. And if you don't listen, well, that just means he'll get even more bossy. But eventually, after running through his Madonna whore dilemma, because yes, he really is that classic, he does manage to balance his needs. He finally finds his personal Aphrodite, the one who can be both his mythic goddess and his ultimate sexy vixen. And it's a delicate balance, but someone's got to do it. And honestly, keeping up with Aries is a full-time job. His partner has to walk a tightrope. 1 minute, she's supposed to be a divine, untouchable angel, and the next she's to be like a full-blown seductress. So no pressure, right? But the good news is he is the one who has to figure out his own issues, thank God. So yeah, that's the Aries man for you guys. Straightforward, no unnecessary layers, no deep mystery, no what does he really mean, none of that Scorpio level drama bullshit. Like, total opposite of Scorpio man episode. He's simple, he's fun, he's exactly what you see on the surface is what you get. And honestly, that's what makes him so great. I love Aries men. Always have a soft spot for them. Their raw masculinity, it's all in all, it's so uncomplicated and amazing. So they're basically human firecrackers, always exploding onto every situation. No invitation necessary. Life, love, sex, chaos, you name it. They're chasing it down, not waiting for anything. Subtlety is not in their vocabulary. With fire as their element, they are pure life force energy on steroids. Add in their cardinal modality, which screams act first, think never. And you've got a walking spark plug. So their planetary symbol, just Mars, the glyph literally shaped like the male genitalia, because of course it is. The ram's head and horns, classical representation of strength, dominance, and sheer stubbornness. basically the zodiac's official charge first, deal with the consequences later mascot. And then the psychology of it, let's talk about that for a second, because they are a bit they have a bit of like delusions of grandeur, complete disregard for authority, occasional temper tantrums, or not occasional, frequent temper tantrums and overaggression. That's just a Tuesday night. They might also struggle with sexism, prejudice, and slightly allergic to self-awareness, but who's counting? And then astrologically, Aries is linked to ages 0 to 7, which honestly explains everything: birth, bloody and violent toddlers, all about playing alone and throwing fits when things don't go their way. And Aries men, yeah, pretty much the same. They're forever in a battle for survival, even when no one is actually fighting them. Aries energy can create or destroy depending on the day. So they live for that. They live for the conquest, proving themselves, which is probably why it's a perfect example like of what not to do, because Aries can be low-key misogynistic and not the most emotionally available. Even their birth season is dramatic. Aries kicks off the equinox, the official start of spring, because they need to go first, and that cardinal signs always kick off the start of the season. So the cardinal signs that we have in the zodiac are Aries, which kicks off spring, and then we have Cancer, which kicks off summer, Libra, who kicks off fall, and then we have Capricorn, who kicks off the winter. There you have it. Aries man in all his glory, chaos and testosterone fueled intensity. He's basically Adam, clay and all. Health risks, yes, they do have health risks, such as headaches. Like head injuries are probably the things that they should look out for, since Mars rules their system, and they're always pumped full of adrenaline and testosterone, which can explain why they're always ready to fight or fuck or flee or whatever, depending on the situation. And let's not forget famous Aries men: Robert Downey Jr., Paul Rudd, Heath Ledger, Christopher Walken. All of those are just perfect examples of typical Aries energy. And when it comes to what turns them on with women, like I said, it's like the more feminine you are, the better. They do like long hair, long legs. They do like a little bit of boob and ass in there. Nothing too fake. You got to stay in that natural feminine beauty type way, but not too natural where you're like leaving your hair grow. Like they love that Barbie look too. So it's a mix. It's a very complex. We'll get into that more when we talk about specific compatibility. So yeah, that is Aries men for you guys in a nutshell. Intense, hot-headed, aggressive, and forever chasing some grand self-fulfilling prophecy. Love them or leave them, but you cannot ignore them, because trust me, they'll make sure they exist. All right, guys, that is it for this episode. I missed you guys so much. I will be back soon, assuming my life isn't consumed by, legal chaos again. But next time, we will dive into Aries compatibility, because honestly, pairing this sign with others is an entire science in itself. So stay tuned, stay chaotic, and as always, much love. Talk soon.